Good afternoon, ACTRA, Stunt community, and welcome. My name is David Gale, and I am proud to be the president of ACTRA Toronto. And I'm honored to host this first ever ACTRA PRS and UBCP ACTRA use fee webinar for the ACTRA Stunt community. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to acknowledge the land on which this meeting is taking place for me here in Toronto. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, the Haudenosaunee, and the land. The treaty was created to share and protect what is still their traditional territory. This area around the Great Lakes represents the dish that we all feed from, and we must share with one spoon. Subsequent Indigenous nations, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and the respect for the land we now share. We are all treaty people who have a responsibility to maintain the spirit of the Dish with One Spoon covenant. You are welcome to check out your Indigenous land on your own. In the light of discovery of more than 1,000 unmarked graves of the children found on the grounds of former Indian residential schools, let's have a moment of silence for these children, each with a name, each with a story. Now, ACTRA meetings usually begin with an acknowledgement of our commitment to respectful work, meeting, and learning environments. We neither condone nor tolerate behavior that undermines the dignity or self-esteem of any individual or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. Discriminatory speech or conduct based on gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, disability, age, class, religion, ethnic origin, membership or work category, or family status hurts and divides us. Our activities are harassment-free zones where dignity and equality are respect are our goals. Now, on with the webinar. We are fortunate as members in that many years ago, very smart, future-looking people championed the notion that for as long as the network as long as the work of performance is used and exploited, we should share in those profits alongside producers and distributors. Those terms were negotiated into our contracts, and over the years, as entertainment and media have evolved, so too have those terms and how those monies reach us. To say that it has become complicated is an understatement. To many of us, how the collection, calculation, and disbursement of use fees might as well be in a foreign language. And honestly, to many of us, it is. Today, we are making a concerted effort to help members understand how use fees work. You need to know, and you want to know, and you've told us you want to know how these use fees work. Over the years, information and explanations have been posted that many may not have found as useful as it could have been. We hope that this format will resonate with more members. After the presentation, we will be happy to answer any questions you may have and would ask that you post them at the bottom of the screen in the Q&A tab. And we are recording this, so if you haven't been able to make this one or you want to tell your friends about it or your colleagues and your coworkers, you can always come on to the ACTRA websites and find this recording. It is going to be very informative. Now let me introduce with pleasure Michael Murray, the director and ACTRA PRS, who will lead this presentation along with the panelists who have put in a great deal of work and effort to help us all understand use fees better. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, David. I just want to say it's an honor to be here today. We know the great work you do and the impact you make in making film and television productions across Canada and your very important role of the stunt community. So we want to make sure we get some questions answered, try to explain some things in detail, And I've got a great set of panelists along with me from UBCP ACTRA. We have Sandy Perron, who is the business agent and residual and use fee for residual and use fee distribution. I have Max Wagner, who is assistant director here at ACTRA PRS. Courtney Borden, senior claims officer at ACTRA PRS. Jen McLaren, claims officer at ACTRA PRS. And someone I'm sure that needs no introduction, but I will introduce her anyways, Tanya Cardwell, who is the ACTRA National Stunt Liaison. So you're looking at a presentation. Hopefully you can see this on your screen. I'm going to ask for one thumbs up from folks that they can see the presentation from my fellow panelists. Great. Okay, and we're going to get into it. So today what we're going to cover are some of the basics of the use fee system, and then get into more detail of the two main options of the use fee system and the two main agreements, which really represents most of the use fees in Canada. Then we are going to look at how we collect use fees and how we enforce the collection of use fees, looking at the distribution of use fees, and the tax impact of use fees, and look at some results, some example productions, and some just overall financial numbers of what's been distributed over time. Talk a little bit about how they're negotiated and the environment that we're negotiating use fees within. And lastly, we'll touch upon foreign royalties and the audiovisual right in Canada, which is a departure into the land of copyright. So just on the basics, the first thing we want to talk about is structure. You as members are central to the union and the determinant body. You vote for your councils at your branches, and those branch councils then elect and nominate and elect an ACTRA National Council. And then we see two parts of the ACTRA family that deal with residuals. So one part is ACTRA PRS, which is a separate incorporated not-for-profit, but that's wholly controlled by ACTRA National Council. And ACTRA PRS manages use fees for the IPA, broadcaster agreements, and others. And separately, UBCP ACTRA, the branch, our BC branch and UBCP ACTRA, has a residuals department where we have Sandy from the residuals department today. And they are looking at residuals under the BCMPA and BCAA. We didn't want to leave out AFBS and MBT, which are the two bodies that handle insurance and retirement for ACTRA performers. And there are certain parts of the use fee process where you'll see funds flow to those bodies for your insurance and retirement. Right away, we wanted to let you know you can contact us at any time. If you have questions that linger after this presentation, if you have questions about a specific production, you have questions in general, you can reach ACTRA PRS at this number, this general email, and this website, and UBCP ACTRA the same. And please do reach out to us. We want to make sure your questions are all answered and that we're working together to collect and distribute as much use fees as we can for ACTRA performers. So I'm going to turn over to Max to answer the basic question: what are use fees and residuals?
Hello. Thank you, Michael. Use fees are monies collected on behalf of the performers from the exploitation of the production in all media and territories around the world. The terms of the use fees and residuals are outlined in the ACTRA collective agreements. Today, we're going to discuss the independent production agreement that ACTRA PRS works with, and the British Columbia Master Production Agreement, BCMPA, which ACTRA UBC works under.
And to introduce us to the start of the use fee system, we want to start with understanding what declared use is. And Courtney's going to take us through that.
Hello, everybody. I'll give you an overview of declared use and where you can find that on your contract. One of the first decisions a producer must make before contracting performers is the selection of the intended declared use of the production. This slide shows the 7 types of declared use outlined in the IPA and the BCMPA. Those uses are theatrical, which has a term of worldwide theatrical use for the period of copyright, It should be noted that currently copyright ends 75 years after the death of the last surviving copyright holder. The next use is free television, which is 1 domestic run in Canada. Pay television, which is 1 year's use in Canada. Cable television, which is 3 years use in Canada. New media, which has 2 different periods, which are 6 months or 1 year, depending on the budget of the new media production. Educational, which has a 3 years use in Canada. And compact devices, which is 2 years use in Canada. As you may notice from the slide, there are different terms of length between the 2 agreements. So I'm going to pass it off to Sandy so she can go over the declared use terms in the BCMPA.
Under the BCMPA, the declared use for theatrical is worldwide theatrical use for a period of copyright of the production. For free television, it's 1 domestic run in Canada. For pay TV, it's 1 year's use in Canada. For cable television, it's 2 years use in Canada. And for new media, it's 90 days worldwide use. And for educational, it's 2 years use in Canada. For compact devices, 2 years use in Canada.
All right, this is the section of the IPA contract where you can identify the declared use. It should be noted that the number of declared use options on the contract do not align with the number of declared use options that we just went over in the IPA. In previous rounds of negotiations, ACTRA has attempted to address this issue and align the options in the contract with the IPA, but this change was rejected by the CMPA.
For the BCMPA, the declared use is located under nature of production near the top portion of the contract. The 7 declared uses are indicated, and new media is also indicated as tier A, B, C, D, or high budget SVOD.
So the declared use, the producer has the ability to exhibit in the declared use for the minimum fees in the agreement. But should the producer wish to exploit that production in any other market or for any other period of time, that is when they need to choose a use fee option. In order to understand use fee options, it's really important to understand the concept of distributors' gross revenue, which is what use fees will be derived from. So distributors' gross revenue under both the IPA and BCMPA are all monies derived in any manner whatsoever from distribution of the production. And that's from a head distributor or any sub-distributors. So these are all monies related to any exhibition. And you'll see we're going to describe the main 2 options to handle use fees for producers and distributors. It's their option that they have to select at the time of production in order to pay those use fees. The first one we are going to talk about is prepayment, and we're going to talk first about prepayment under the IPA, and we'll discuss prepayment under BCMPA in a moment. So a prepayment allows the producer to use the production in media outside of the declared use for a defined period of time. The prepayment is a set premium of the performer's net fees. And net fees are those fees with matching, your gross fees, but deducted for non-applicable time on camera, as well as for things such as, travel and per diem. When the prepayment expires, producers pay a percentage of DGR for additional use. Currently, this is 3.6% under the IPA. So these are the 5, under the IPA, there are 5 prepayment options, main prepayment options, and I'll take you through them now. 130% for the payment of 130% of net fees at the time of production. The producer can use the production for theatrical films in theaters and also in all other media except for new media for 4 consecutive years. For theatrical films at 135% of net fees, you can use all platforms except for new media including new media for 4 consecutive years. For 105% for essentially television episodic content, you can, for 105%, you can use all uses except theatrical and new media for 4 years. And for 110%, all uses except theatrical, but including new media for 4 consecutive years. And the last main option is 105%. You can use on new media only beyond the declared use period for 4 consecutive years. So again, the concept is the producer pays that premium and then gets a bundle of platforms for a period of time. And that 4-year period starts from the date of the first residual use, not from the date of the declared use. I'm going to turn over to Sandy to explain the variants of those options under the BCMPA.
Under the prepayment option for the BCMPA, the period of use of the production outside of the declared use is either 4 or 5 years. For theatrical films, the prepayment is 135%, all uses for 4 years, or 130% all uses except new media for 4 years. For free television long-form programs, the prepayment is 110%, all uses except theatrical for 4 years, or 105%, all uses except theatrical and new media for 4 years. For cable television long-form programs, the prepayment is 110%, all uses except theatrical for 5 years, or 105%, all uses except theatrical and new media for 5 years. For free television series or cable television series, the prepayment is 110%, all uses except theatrical for 5 years, or 105% all uses except theatrical and new media for 5 years. For new media programs, the prepayment is 110%, all uses except theatrical for 5 years, or 105% for new media only for 5 years. For all other media enumerated in C101, the prepayment is 110%, all uses except theatrical for 4 years, or 105% all uses except theatrical and new media for 4 years.
So at this point, the producer has selected a declared use. The producer has selected a bundle of platforms in a time period where they can use it without the payment of use periods, and they have to select both of those at the time of production, and that'll be on your performer's contract. If there are any uses outside of the bundle they've selected, or if the prepayment period has expired, any further distributor's gross revenue received by the producer or distributor or sub-distributors will be shared with performers as use fees. We'll talk about how much is shared and how it's shared in a moment. This can help to go through an example. So here we have a producer who has selected a theatrical declared use for use in theaters and has also selected the 135% prepayment. So this means that film can be used in all uses and on all platforms worldwide for 4 consecutive years from the first residual use. So let's say we've produced this film earlier, maybe this year or late last year, and it opened in theaters on June 1st, 2021. Remember that first theatrical run, and in fact, for theatrical runs, they're quite long as the length of copyright. That's included in the declared use under your minimum fees. Then on June 1st, 2022, it's exhibited on new media. That is when the prepayment period starts, and this 135% premium that was paid at the time of production, that use on new media is covered here. And in fact, any use on any platform throughout the whole world from 4 years from June 1st will be covered. So we've hit June 1st, 2022. They've exhibited on new media, let's say a Netflix, and that period has gone on. Let's say they've stopped exhibiting it. They have no live license agreements or contracts, just because that's the most simplest example. On June 1st, 2026, the prepayment period has ended. And so any other use from that point forward will result in use fees. Let's say, again, a new media exhibitor, such as Netflix or a Disney Plus or something like that, would like to license the film again on November 1st of 2026, or maybe it's a new platform that wants to license it. That revenue derived from that license will be entirely directed into use fees at 3.6% of distributors' gross revenue on that sale. And that 3.6% of distributors' gross revenue will be shared with performers. So that is one example of the prepayment method. What we'd like to do now is move on to the other main method in the IPA and BCMPA that's used to determine use fees, again, at the selection of the producer. And that is called the advance method. And I'm going to turn it over to Max to go over that.
Thank you. The advance means you receive a share of DGR for use of the production outside of the declared use at the time of production in advance of sales. So at the time, the producer can pay, there's 4 options, a percentage of your net fees, either 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%. Whatever percentage the producer chooses, all performers receive the same percentage. There's no picking and choosing. With all of these, there are a different percentage of DGR attached to it. So when time comes for use payments to kick in, at 100, if the producer chose 100% advance, they would pay 3.6% DGR. Now, I just want you to know that this advance amount that was paid to you, the producer gets to recoup it first before they actually owe any use fees. And what we look at is the entire total of the advance paid to the performers. It's called an aggregate advance. And that is what they're allowed to recoup first. We'll go through an example and show you how many license sales it takes before they actually have to pay out use fees. So as I said, 100% advance is 3.6 DGR. 75% advance is 4.6 DGR. So the less you pay up front, the more you pay out back. 50% advance is 5.6% DGR, and 25% is 6.6 DGR. So here's an example of trying to show you what kind of sales are required to recoup the, as I explained, the aggregate or total advance paid to all performers. So there's 3 examples here. So the net fees of all the performers in all of these is $450,000. In the first example, the producer chose 50% advance, which means that they paid all the performers $225,000 at the time of production as an advance. 50% translates into 5.6% applicable DGR. When you do the math, they have to make over $4 million in sales before they owe any use fees to the performers. And you can see as it goes up at 75%, the advance total is higher and they have to pay less DGR percentage, but they still have to make 7.3 million. And if they chose the 100,000 or 100%, the aggregate advance is at 450,000. They pay 3.6% DGR, but they need to make $12.5 million before performers are paid anything. And in the second one, it shows you with a higher budget at $1 million, at 50%, they're looking at almost $9 million in sales before they have to remit any use fees. At 75%, they're looking at 16.3 million. And at 100%, they're looking at almost $28 million in sales before they have to remit 3.6% of DGR.
And Courtney, you want to take folks through where they would see this option on their performer's contract.
So here's a screenshot of where you would see, where you would be able to identify which option was selected on your IPA contract. As you can see, there's the section for prepayment, there's a section for advance, and then we would check the appropriate percentage would be checked off for either one of those selections made by the producer.
And Sandy, yeah.
For the BCMPA, the producer can select either the prepayment, the advance, or the individual use option located under additional release rights near the bottom of the performer contract. There is also another option for tier A, B, and C new media programs if none of these options are selected.
Hi, there's a special consideration for stunt coordinators. Beginning in 2016 in the IPA and 2012 in the BCMPA, stunt coordinators do not participate in prepayment or advance, but they do participate in the DGR pool.
So this explains the two main options under the two main agreements, and most use fees that you will receive will be from what we've just described. There are other use fee provisions under other sections of the IPA and BCMPA, which we would just mention here briefly without going into detail what they are. There's the residual use / individual use option, which pays from $1. It is not a very popular option. It's not one that's selected by producers and distributors, well, producers that often or very seldomly. There's a made for new media at 0% in both IPA and BCMPA. For indie production, there's the CPIP and IPA, and similarly BC Indie program and BCMPA. There's an animation section of the IPA as opposed to a separate agreement, which you'll see in BC. And there's lifestyle and documentary programs and the BCMPA. There are also other ACTRA agreements that have use fees defined in them, other than IPA and BCMPA. Again, what we've described so far and the IPA and BCMPA will be the majority of what you'll see, but there is the British Columbia Animation Agreement, there's Ubisoft and the General Video Games Agreement. There are broadcaster agreements such as the CBC agreement, there's NFB, there's the audio code. But last time, I'll say this, most what you will see is under the IPA and BCMPA, under the options we've described. Lastly, when there are SAG-AFTRA performers on ACTRA productions, they will earn a prorated percentage of use fees, and the use fees will be distributed based on the SAG-AFTRA contract, not the ACTRA contract. So that would impact ACTRA performers' use fees.
Michael, we do have a quick question.
Yeah,
before we go any further. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, so the question is, do coordinators still have to wait for the 4-year period before getting residuals, or are they in effect straight away? Alistair's going to type something for us as well, but no, they are not in effect straight away. They are still have to wait the 4-year period if it's the prepayment method, and they would still have to wait for the cast to recoup its aggregate advance if it's the advance method. So essentially they would get paid use fees at the same time as everyone else.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, good. All right. And here we are going into the collection of use fees. And I'm going to ask Courtney to bring us into that.
So how are use fees collected? Use fees are collected through reporting we receive from the producers and distributors. Producers and distributors are required to report on a semi-annual basis for the first 2 years, and then annually from that point forward. It should be noted that the annual reporting is the minimum under the IPA. We do have some producers and distributors that report on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, even after that, even after the first 2 years. So that's why sometimes you may see payments for some productions are more frequent than other productions. If there are use fees owing, they are paid at the time of reporting by the producer or distributor. So how are use fees enforced? If reporting is due, a claims officer will reach out to the producer or distributor to initiate a claim. If within a given amount of time reporting is not received the claims officer will follow up with the producer or distributor for the status of reporting. Once the reporting is received, the officer will analyze the reports and will follow up with the producer or distributor for clarification on any issues that they may find within the reports. After this follow-up, if there are any unresolved issues or if reporting has not been received, there are 4 actions that can be taken to try and get resolution. The 4 actions that can be taken are a request for detailed reporting from the financiers, auditing the reporting party, grievance and arbitration, and lastly, in partnership with the branches, the production guarantor status of the reporting party could be diminished.
And we know there's a lot of interest around enforcement, so I'll just expand a little bit on some of the things Courtney said. So there are 2 real main stages of enforcement. The first might sound like it's a small thing, but it actually takes a lot of time. The first is trying to get the reports in the door. Even though this is an obligation of producers under the agreement, you would not be surprised to hear, perhaps, that not everyone submits all of their reports on time every year. And it is a perpetual commitment. It is, once you have signed up to an ACTRA production, technically you are supposed to report from there on after, after 2 years, once a year. And that technically for many, many years into the future, we still haven't seen the end of that since the start of use fees. So this can be what we see as non-compliance, and we just have to follow up to get the reports in the door. And so we have to call, we have to email, we have to, very rarely would we take it to grievance arbitration just to get the report in the door, because the likely remedy would be you have to get the report in the door. And so we try to get that done before we go there. The other piece that's much more intensive, and I think what folks are more interested in, is what happens with the numbers when we get them. Do we just take the numbers face value and process? And if there's a check with it, do we just go for it? No, we don't. We have a whole system of analysis and prioritization of follow-up. So we'll take those numbers, and we have our best resource in verifying the accuracy of those numbers are the productions in the system. For ACTRA PRS, we have over 17,000 productions in the use fee system. And we will compare the use fees from the new report to either that same production or similar productions, productions of similar popularity, or which we can now gain a lot easier based on internet resources and other pieces of information. And we will try to verify the accuracy of those reports. And if we have concerns with the amount of use fees being paid, again, you won't be surprised. Usually our concerns is that not enough use fees have been paid, not that too much have been paid. So where we are concerned that not enough use fees have been paid, we will follow up. First, we will follow up just by communicating with the party and asking questions. If we are not satisfied with those answers, or if those answers don't come, we will use one of these options that are on your screen right now. So we do request reports from financiers. We also request reports from distributors. If the producer is reporting to us, often they've received a report from the distributor talking about overall sales in terms of platforms, territories, and we'll ask for that detail. Audit is not as popular as it used to be. We did audit productions. We have audited productions. We continue to do so from time to time, but at ACTRA PRS, not as popular in that the audit tends to be intensive and not yield any better results, or in fact, probably even worse results than a grievance and arbitration. Also, if we found something in the audit and it's of dispute, we would still have to move to grievance and arbitration. So where we are pretty certain of the issue, and we often are certain of the questions and the issues at hand, we will move to grievance and arbitration. Right now, ACTRA PRS, for instance, has 41 live arbitrations due to use fees, and our follow-up on not believing the numbers reported or not agreeing with the interpretation of the contract as they have been applied by the producers and distributors, and in every case where they have undervalued the use fees for performers. So we file those, we resolve those, we have a good record of winning those, and we move on. And we know it's important to be out there in the community and that they know they are checking. In terms of our staff, everyone actually that is for ACTRA PRS that is on the webinar today, their entire job is dedicated to enforcement. They do not enter data. They're not data entry folks. They don't enter the data into the system. They don't go through those other pieces. They are involved in payment somewhat, but other than that, the majority of their job is following up with distributors, following up with producers, and ensuring the use fees are accurate and that they're paid.
Michael,
Lastly,
sorry, it's me.
Sure.
I'm a pain,
Sure. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. So when was the actual last time you guys audited somebody? I mean, you don't do it very often, and it kind of makes sense. You might as well go for something with more teeth in it. That makes sense, but just curious.
Yeah, since I'm relatively new, as you know, Tanya, I have looked through those records, and our most prominent audit, which was lengthy and intensive, was in the early 2000s. So that's our prominent audit. That doesn't mean we haven't consistently asked for reporting. And then usually, again, if it gets to the level where we're still not believing the distributor, we'll just file for arbitration based on the reason. We usually can get enough information to know the reason we are after and the game, I shouldn't call it the game that's being played, the area that is being misreported. It would only be in a case where we just think we don't believe this number, but we don't know exactly what they're doing, where we wouldn't file for arbitration, or we don't even know in general what they're doing. For instance, if a distributor we can usually get far enough to get the reporting to a point where we can see the distributor has allocated, this is quite a heavy level of detail, but has allocated too much revenue to the declared use as opposed to the residual use. So once we're at that level of suspicion, we don't need to audit to find that out. We'll just file a grievance based on that basis. And then through that process, once they're in front of an arbitrator, we have discovery. And that's a legal process where the distributor would have to give us lots of information, as much information and more than you would ever get in an audit. So this is why we have leaned towards arbitration more than audit. At ACTRA PRS, I do think, Sandy, I'd like to hear your perspective as well. I think it's a slightly different approach taken in UBCP.
Right. Thanks, Michael. Yes, we did an audit in 2020. And currently we have 33 grievances that are active. I totally, everything that you said about how we pursue and enforce the collective agreement is happening here at UBCP ACTRA. There's myself, and we have another rep that pursues the use fee reporting and make sure that it's accurate. And we ask for distribution reports from the distributors so that we can see those licenses and verify that what is being reported is accurate. And if it's not, then we either, we do proceed with the grievance and arbitration under our Article A10. And we have the right to audit as well in our collective agreement. So we use both of those, whatever we need to do to bring in use fee reporting and pay performers.
Okay, just another question. Grievance and arbitration can't be cheap. Can you explain with that number of cases going on, just what that looks like as far as, what it's costing members to chase people?
Sure. So we I'll talk about it in a general sense, grievances and arbitrations. And in fact, really, it's more arbitration in the IPA. The IPA guides use fee issues to go directly to arbitration, which actually makes them more costly because while we can file for arbitration as staff, by the time we're preparing for the arbitration, we'll have engaged external counsel. We have internal counsel that guides us at ACTRA. It's great, but we still would want external labor counsel to guide and in fact lead the arbitration process once we're in front of an arbitrator. So the main incremental costs, other than staff, because we have staff guiding this process, like the folks you see on the screen, are the legal fees and the fees of the arbitrator. And I suppose the fee of, in the before times, the fee of the arbitration room. And so again, the main driver is legal fees. A arbitration could be a 2-hour consult with external counsel, and the distributor comes to their senses and everything's great, or a settlement's reached, and that would be $1,000. But an arbitration can easily be 2, 5, 7 years. And can range into the tens, or even a very large arbitration over $100,000 in legal fees alone. So we tend to not go, we haven't seen too many at that level. Many of our 41 arbitrations right now are, have taken many years. The other great piece of it I did mention before, sorry, just to throw it in, Tanya, was that when we file for arbitration and notice goes to the CMPA, the Association of Producers, we bargain the IPA with, and the AFAQM in Quebec. And so they are made aware of this community issue. They might chime in and defend an interpretation over another. And what this does is it allows the community precedent, even if it's seen as non-precedent setting, we try to establish those ground rules and those interpretations in the community. And we like to think one successful arbitration does tend to resonate beyond just the impacted production.
So that's almost kind of like a preemptive grievance?
Well, I'd say it's an actual grievance with an actual production, but where we are concerned it's a community issue, that can really help because other people can hear about that arbitration and stop doing the same practice.
So you want to stop it in its tracks.
That's right. I mean, and there are actually legal concepts of how it does provide notice, etc. So this is again, it's just another reason we like arbitration over audit, because an audit wouldn't do that. So if it's a habit we're seeing in multiple distributors, then arbitration's a better tool in that way.
Okay, and sorry to keep harping on this one, but it's really important to our community.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the producer guarantor status with the branches? Is there, and I think we have Alistair on the call here too somewhere. Is there a process? Yes.
Yeah.
So glad he's here. And by the way, we forgot to introduce you. So Alistair Hepburn.
I'm so sorry. Yes, it wasn't in my notes. But
No.
Alistair Hepburn is the director of film, television, and digital media at ACTRA Toronto, and a great help to ACTRA PRS.
So is there some sort of a communication with the branches? Like if we've got a bad apple in the bunch who, and we've had them in the past, and I could name you a few with some choice words, who, traditionally have thumbed the system, not paid, have gone around and, signed up to do more shows under a different name. Is there some sort of a communication process between PRS and the branches so that everybody knows what's going on? I think I remember hearing that you and Alistair got together with one production.
So the ACTRA National, PRS, and all of the branches maintain an unfair producer list. And that unfair producer list is shared amongst all of the branches. Not only that, at ACTRA Toronto, we then in turn share that list with all of the unions and guilds working in Canada. And the way the system works is the person that has the signatory responsibility for that production company, they are named alongside the production company. So that individual can't go and just start a new production company because it's that individual person as well that is tied to the unfair producer notification. That help?
Yeah, and so we've been working, we do work together to make sure we set up these consequences, but that ability not to post a bond or not to have a letter of credit when you're producing is valued by producers. The bond and letter of credit is higher under the IPA than under BCMPA, so it's a bit more of a stick outside of BC that can be used. And so, yeah, Alistair has in fact, led us in this way, saying, "Hey, folks, let's make sure we're exchanging the information and exchanging it on time of those who aren't paying use fees." So it starts to impact their future productions and their ability to produce without posting a bond and without writing a letter of credit or getting a letter of credit written.
And then just one last thing, and I will let you move on. Sorry.
No, it's good.
No, this is a really important topic for our community. Is there a process in place to proactively seek funds rather than just waiting for those reports to come in?
Yeah. So the good part is we know we know the productions we have. So I mean, the very most important first step I actually didn't talk about was making sure union work is organized. So that's at the branch level. Again, the great work of Alistair and his team in Toronto and the organizers out in BC. Because without the union contract, there are no use fees. And in order to get to a union contract, we have to act in solidarity. So I wanted to make sure that was said. So that's the proactive work. That's really where the heavy proactive work starts first. Once it's under a union contract, we do get legal documents and we have a record of it. And we have an ability to automatically check in when we don't receive reports. So and yes, we do that. Again, as we check the list of productions that are supposed to have reported that year, that quarter, and then we send notices. Now, we are looking at ways to make sure this is efficient and perhaps even automated. We're looking at ways that we can, that date hits and the distributor gets a notice within 3 weeks or something, or within 3 days, or maybe even within 3 hours. Right now, that does take staff checking lists of those that need to have been reporting. At times, prioritizing those lists out of the 17,000, as you can imagine, and then sending notices to those who haven't reported. And once as I said, getting reports in the door is a lot of effort. It is mostly proactive at this point, unfortunately. We don't have a distributor community that is, I wouldn't say the majority of the 17,000 productions come in every year. Let's put it that way. We have to work for them. And that's the reality we are in, and that's the reality we're pushing. But it is mostly proactive at this point, Tanya.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think we should probably move on because we're
Sure.
cognizant of the time.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. So we're about halfway through our time. I don't know. Not sure if we're halfway through our presentation. Oh, we are about halfway. That's good. But we want time for questions. And I'm going to toss it back to Courtney for this slide.
So as Michael just mentioned, like one of the roles of the claims officers, one of the main roles of the claims officer is to be proactive in obtaining reporting and collecting use fees on behalf of our members. That being said, notification from our members on productions being exploited is a very helpful tool and an asset in helping us prioritize claims, and it's greatly appreciated. So here's the process for letting us know. If you're aware of a title that you performed on that's currently being exploited in the market, and you haven't recently received use fee payments from ACTRA PRS or UBCP, you can get in contact with us, notify us of this. And the ways you can notify us are by sending an email, giving us a call, or on our website, we have a page called Have You Seen Yourself? And you can submit a report there on the website. This inquiry will be directed to one of the claims officers. And one of the first steps that the claims officers will go through is looking at the reporting for the production, any of the previous reports that we received, to identify if that use has been reported, and the length of the license of that use. If during our analysis, the claims officer determines that that use that has been reported by the member has not been covered in the reporting that we previously received, then we'll initiate a claim and collect any use fees that are owed for that identified use and any other additional uses that may have happened since the last time that the producer or distributor has reported.
Great. So at this point in the process, we have gotten the use fees from the distributor or producer. And now in this section, we're going to talk a little bit about how we distribute those use fees and what method is used. The majority of this method is in the agreement itself, the IPA or BCMPA. Some parts of it are in the bylaws, and we realize that there are one or two tax implications that are of course in the Income Tax Act. So we start with by getting to a number of units per performer on the production or on the episode. In order to do this, we take the gross fees earned on the production or the episode, including overscale, penalties, and overtime, but excluding expense reimbursements and per diems. That's the definition of gross fees in the agreement. So we take those gross fees earned, and keep in mind that's gross fees, not number of days. So if you have a day, I understand there are days a stunt performer could be paid more for one day, depending what they're doing, than another production where you are paid less for 10 days of work per se. So again, this is based on your gross fees earned, not the number of days. Those gross fees earned are divided by a minimum daily fee of the lowest rated category. So if the actor is the lowest rated category on a production, it would be divided by that fee that's in the IPA or BCMPA, that minimum fee. And that comes up with a number of units. And there is a maximum put on that number of units. For episodic productions, it's a 20 unit maximum per episode. And for non-episodic, such as film, it's 20 units overall. There is a maximum because through the years, and in fact, when we were setting this up, and we being the members negotiating the IPA, when the members were setting this up at IPA negotiations, there was a desire to make sure that use fees were shared. And there was a concern that with just a couple of very high earning performers on a production, that the majority of the cast would not enjoy use fees unless there was a cap put on the amount of use fees earned. And so this is the nature of the cap. It's a cap on units. Again, 20 units per episode cap for episodic and 20 units overall for non-episodic. When we have that units per performer, we then take the total use fees that we've received from the production, and we divide those total use fees by the total number of performer units. We add up every performer's units that we just calculated. We have the total performer unit, and what we get is a gross use fee per unit rate. And then we go back in and multiply each individual performer's units by that rate, and we get each individual's gross use fees for that production.
Okay, so sorry, I'm going to jump in here. So to clarify, you could have two performers on the same set.
Yes.
One works 10 days,
Yes.
another works 1 day, and that one performer who works that 1 day does a really fantastic flaming spiral or something like that and earns more in that 1 day than the performer did for 10 days. The performer who earns more is going to earn more in use fees.
That's correct.
So it's based on gross. It's not based on the number of days or the amount of time that somebody spends on set. It's based on the gross fees.
Yes.
Okay, just clarifying.
Yes. And in fact, there's a question here. This does seem like an extraordinarily large disparity, but just it is possible. I suppose it's possible. There's an example where a performer made $10,000 in residuals on a production, and the coordinator, let me get this right. Yes, and the coordinator / performer only made $600. That is an extraordinarily large disparity. I'm not sure if units alone could explain it. but that is the first factor would be the units alone. There's also something else that can happen. We can talk about this a little bit later. It's actually not in the presentation, where we couldn't find a performer for a while, and maybe this performer, in the example in the questions, it's possible that a performer hadn't been paid for that production yet over 2 or 3 years. Then we found them and paid them all the residuals at once while the coordinator was being paid ongoing, and so just got the latest chunk of use fees. I mean, again, the disparity of 10,000 to 600 does seem exceptional, and would be difficult to explain in units alone. And we would really have to see we'd have to go over the specific case. This is a good time to remind you, this is a perfect time to call us if you see that kind of disparity. And we know folks talk, and we're happy they talk. We can't share anyone's use fees with anyone else, but if 2 performers decide to share what they've earned on a production, and you want to bring that to us with a concern, absolutely, please call us. We will go through as much detail as we can without, again, revealing anyone else's use fees, and tell you how we got there.
And I provided that link, Michael, in response to that as well. That link does lead you to Patricia Lanza's contact information, which is also on the website, and she can definitely help you out.
Right, and Patricia will channel you guys to us if we need to. We'll get your question answered. Okay, and that's at ACTRA PRS. And remember, in the presentation, there's also a UBCP link as well. Sorry, in this process, then we got to this individual gross use fees per performer. And the last stage before we distribute our contributions and deductions. So producer will contribute on top of the use fees 12% currently in both IPA and BCMPA to insurance and retirement. Again, on top of the use fees. And that will go to each performer's insurance and retirement account at either AFBS or MBT. The 1% admin fee, this is the producer's paid admin fee. They'll pay 1% of total use fees on top of use fees to ACTRA PRS or UBCP for administering this part of the agreement. And they'll pay applicable sales tax to the performer on use fees if the performer is sales tax eligible. And there are many different things that go into that. But if you are, if you have an HST number and you collect sales tax and it's the right circumstance, they'll pay the HST on top of the use fees. And then what's deducted from use fees. So under the IPA and BCMPA, the member makes a 3% contribution that's deducted from their use fees. Under the IPA, 2.25% work dues go to the branch where the production was produced. And under the BCMPA, well, the 2.25% work dues go to the BCMPA, which is the branch. Under the IPA only, there's a 5% service fee to the ACTRA PRS for members in good standing. And for non-members or other folks don't like when I say non-members. For members not in good standing, there is a 25% service fee, and there is no work dues that is applied. There is sales tax in certain circumstances under the IPA on the service fee. Now, if you are a non-resident, so if you live, if you have your tax residency outside of Canada, you would be withheld 23% non-residence tax, and we'd report that to the CRA. And if you were a minor, you would have 25% deducted. And under the IPA, that would go to the ACTRA PRS Minors Trust. And under the BCMPA, that would go to the BC Public Guardian. So what we have here is the statement you received from ACTRA PRS, and we'll go over a UBCP statement as well after this. So this statement you receive from ACTRA PRS, you receive with every payment. If it's a check payment, you would receive it in hard copy along with the check. If it's a direct deposit, you receive this by email at the time the direct deposit is made. And so this first column will be, it's not completely clear. Here's your details up here. This first column would be the list of productions. This is anonymous production 1, anonymous production 2, but you would obviously have more descriptive names. And then here we actually tend to put fairly descriptive language of where the use fee comes from, even up to the point of use and term, as much as we can share. Here we have the total number of the total cast number that's sharing in residuals or use fees. And in this column, we have the number of use fee units and the value per unit that's being applied. That's the two numbers in each row are those two numbers. And here we have the gross use fees that you've earned on this production, and this column here. Here is the percentage producer contribution on top for insurance and retirement. And I like this example because you'd see these two different percentages. Why there are two different percentages is because former agreements would have lower percentages before ACTRA managed to negotiate the percentages up before we banded together and got an improvement to the contract. So you can earn different INR on different productions. If you are a HST, if you have an HST number and it's the right circumstance, this is where the HST percentage would go in and the amount paid, and this is Quebec sales tax if that's applicable. Now we go on to this section, are deductions, and what we see here is the performer's INR contribution at 3%, and we see the dues at 2.25% going to the branch where the production was made. Then we have the service charge that goes to ACTRA PRS, the 5%, the HST on the service charge, if applicable. And in this case, this anonymous performer is a resident of Canada, so had no non-residence tax withheld, and is not a minor, so did not have any minor's trust contribution withheld. And this is where you get to the net amount. This is the amount that goes into your bank account. I know folks have questions about how this compares to your T4A that you receive at the end of the year. It would not be the combination of these amounts on all your reports or the combination of the amounts received in your bank. It would be the combination of the gross amounts received on your reports plus the INR received on your reports under the IPA. This part's handled slightly different under the BCMPA, but under the IPA, if you added all these two columns on all your reports in a taxation year, it should equal the amount on your T4A. Sandy, I'll let you take folks through the the UBCP report.
Okay, this is the payment report that accompanies your use fee check that you receive in the mail. It indicates the company that is reporting, the period end, the gross use fee amount, and the GST. Any deductions such as dues or service charge or RSP deduction. In this case, there's the person is not a minor and there's no non-resident deduction. It also indicates the insurance and retirement contributions by the producer and the net check amount. And Michael was mentioning the tax implications. It's a little different for us because we also pay out in US dollars and Canadian dollars. So it's not quite as easy to just add the gross plus the retirement or the insurance and retirement, whether you're with MBT or AFBS. You have to factor also into the equation the exchange if you've received US dollar checks. So that's something that you can always contact us to help with.
Great, and I just wanted to return back. We showed you the slide earlier, but to remember the different parts in terms of your deductions and the contributions from the producers and where they're going. The branches receive the work dues, and UBCP, being a branch, receives the work dues. ACTRA PRS under the IPA receives that service charge. And the INR contributions go to the retirement bodies, the insurance and retirement bodies, which are AFBS and MBT. So in terms of payment options under the IPA, we only provide checks once. If you're signed up for a check payment, you would receive a check once per year if there are more of $20 or more owing of use fees. So if they're under $20, we would hold that payment until the following year, when hopefully enough has accrued that we'd pay that out. If you're on direct deposit, it's once per month and there's no threshold. This is on purpose. We like folks to be on direct deposit. It's tend to work for us. And under the BCMPA, Sandy?
Yeah, it's always by check. And we have a $10 threshold, and we usually distribute use fee payments once a month.
And the currency handling under the two administrative systems are a little different. So under the IPA for ACTRA PRS, use fees are always converted to Canadian funds first, and then are paid in Canadian funds to Canadian fund accounts. But if you've designated a U.S. fund account that you want to be paid in, we'd convert it back to U.S. funds and pay it to that account.
And for the BCMPA use fees, if we receive the monies in US dollars, we administer the use fee payments in US dollars. So there's no conversion.
So Michael, sorry, lots of folks have questions why you convert the money first and why performers under the IPA can't receive that money directly in US funds before it's converted and then converted back.
You know, through preparing for this presentation, I've been asking those questions myself. Some of it has to do with the way we've administered in the past. Max, do you have a bit more historical context? But it is something we're actually going to look at after preparing for this presentation and see exactly why we do it and whether those reasons are still valid. But go ahead, Max, please.
It is traditionally historical. Our systems aren't set up for the conversion. However, we are not as US heavy as the UBCP, being so close to LA and getting far more payments in US dollars and US productions. But yeah, it's historical, our systems, and that's pretty much.
So we are, so we're going to look at it. I mean, the key part is, are we losing either ACTRA or performers, more importantly, money in the process in doing so? And so let's put it this way. It's been allotted as homework after this presentation for us to take care of. So stay tuned.
Very much. And quickly, Michael, maybe there's the question that Sandy can answer, that why isn't there direct deposit with the BCMPA?
Yes, actually, we were working on a national database, and our hope was, once we got far along in that our next goal will be direct deposit. So it's definitely a priority for us, and it's on our wish list for sure. And I like to think that we're close to implementing it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about the tax impact of use fees. I'm going to turn it over to, and also states, and I'm going to turn it over to Jen. Jen, just if you could come off mute.
That would help. Hi. Taxable income is based on gross use fees. So that's your total amount that you've received. INR is paid by producers. And that also includes INR paid by producers. Both are taxable for IPA and for the BCMPA when members contribute to the AFBAS. There's only retirement is taxable under the BCMPA when members contribute to the MBT. Everything is reported on a T4A. For Canadian residents, those of you that earn 500 or more will receive a tax slip. T4As are issued by ACTRA PRS and UBCP annually. These tax slips are reported to the CRA and to the performers. If you are a non-resident, you have received 25% tax withheld on each of your payments. These will be reported on an N4A form, NR4 form.
And just that's 23% tax withheld for non-residents. Great.
Right.
Great.
Okay, gross earnings on the T4A will differ than the amount paid to use fees. because the T4A reports gross use fees plus the applicable contributions prior to deductions. And also please note that your GST and HST, if you've received it, would not be included on your T4A. I would keep all of your remittances and check them because that's the best way to identify your tax deductions. Estates, prepare a will. Use fees do not have a scheduled expiration. You will receive them as long as the movie or television show is making money. Here are the steps that you need to take. A, you need to prepare a will. B, you need to name a beneficiary in your will. C, the beneficiary and estate needs to provide ACTRA PRS and UBCP with the will and the death certificate. We will pay all amounts as directed in the will or the estate. Beneficiaries then name further beneficiaries in the will. So if the beneficiary becomes deceased, then they need to name a new beneficiary. There is a separate process from AFBS and MBT. So please make sure that you check whichever provider you're using.
Thanks, Jen. And if I can just weigh in here with some experiences that we have had with folks without a will, it does interrupt the ability for your family to continue to receive those benefits without instruction as to where those are going to go. In one case, we actually had a stunt performer whose residuals were tied up for 30 years before the estate was all unwound, and ACTRA PRS had the direction and the permission that they needed through the estate to distribute those use fees. It's super, super important. Do that for your families. It can make the difference between, being able to pay some bills when you're gone and not. And in fact, if you're a member of AFBS, there is a benefit there. If you go to a lawyer and have a will done, send the receipt into AFBS on the extended benefit form, and they will contribute $200 towards that. So super, super important. Make sure that your wishes are known and don't leave it up to the government or a court.
Great. We are going to talk about some examples of productions and just to kind of look at how they've paid out use fees. And we're going to look at overall financial results for use fee distribution over the past number of years. And Max, I'd ask you to take us through that.
Okay. So here's a couple, as Michael said, a couple of examples of productions that have paid out. This one is Flashpoint Season 2, which was produced in 2009. Its declared use was free TV. So that's one exhibit on Canadian television. They chose a 50% advance, which results in 5.6% DGR. The first showing was on January in 2009. There's a total cast of 291 people. The distributor paying use fees is Flashpoint's All Seasons. They recouped their total advance amount that they paid all the performers on that production in 2014 and commenced paying 5.6% of DGR thereafter, and 3.6% of new media thereafter. And we've received 10 payments since then. X-Men Days of Future Past, produced in 2013. Their declared use is theatrical, so theatrical throughout the world, pretty much 75 years from now or whatever. They paid 130% for all uses for 4 years, which their first residual use, so that was the first use outside of theatrical, was October 14th, 2014. And that's when the clock starts ticking, the 4 years time. So the prepayment period ended October 14th, 2018. There's 173 people in the cast, and 20th Century Fox is the distributor, and they're paying 3.6% on all platforms, and we've received 9 payments.
For Fantastic Four, it was produced in 2004. The declared use was theatrical, and the prepayment was 130% to all uses for 4 years from first use in a residual market. The theatrical use was on July 8th, 2005. The first use in a residual market is 6 months after theatrical release, which is January 8th, 2006. The use rights expire January 8th, 2010. There's 159 cast, and the distributor is 20th Century Fox. It was paid at 3.6% for all media, and there's 41 payments so far.
So this is a chart that shows the distribution amounts for the fiscal years of 2019 and 2020. ACTRA PRS is the blue and UBCP is the orange. In 2019, PRS distributed about 15 million. UBCP distributed about 11 million. And in 2020, the year of the pandemic, PRS did 14 million and UBCP did, looks like over 9 million. So that really shows how well we kept going in the pandemic, keep the payments coming in. This is a chart from the 2008 to 2020, and you can see that over all of those years, ACTRA itself has distributed nearly $250 million in use fees. And the timing we may receive, there's a bit of a timing, we may receive more in one fiscal year than we disperse, or we may disperse more in one fiscal year due to the fact that we received the money earlier, but it wasn't enough to go out. We might have gotten more in the next year, or yeah, so it's fluctuating.
So there is a question in the queue. I think it's related to a different subject. Division of use fees on a TV series is per episode among the specific episode's performers, correct? And maybe Max or Sandy could answer that.
Yes, yes. The episode is looked at like a production. So only the performers who are in that episode receive units. So I think that's what they're trying to say. It's not the full season. So every episode has different units for different performers. Then we add all the episodes, like 10 of them. Then that's the full unit value for the season.
And if the use fees come in on a whole season, Max, do we divide them? How do we divide them among the various episodes? Evenly?
Well, then we've accumulated all the units, so then we divide it into the units. So it
Got it.
Unit value.
Got it. Because we've accumulated the units that are calculated on a per episode basis, but we've combined them into the season to match the for distribution. And Sandy, is there anything different on the BCMPA side there?
No, same for us.
Very good. Okay, the slide that's before you now is from the CMPA. This is the Association of Producers. We bargained the IPA with and the BCMPA, and they put out a report once per year on the state of the industry. They tend to look more on the state of the industry from the producer's perspective. We look at the state of performers, but we don't take their information at face value, even in this context. At the same time, it is useful to look at what's being put out. So here we have a division of GDP impact, and many of the sources are aside from the CMPA themselves. So the production part of the sector is obviously the largest part. This is the actual on-set spend and GDP contribution. And the second bar here, distribution, relates most to use fees. So we can see we are related to not exactly the largest part of the sector, but one that's just specifically there for distribution. Now, this information does exclude international distribution. This is distribution to the Canadian market. And in the same report, we see that distribution, again, only to the Canadian market, has been relatively stagnant actually over the past decade, despite the large increase in production and a large increase in foreign investment in production. The distribution revenues of Canadian, this is actually of all work, Canadian and foreign, into the Canadian market has been stagnant. And so it's an interesting stat to look at. This is true of purely Canadian productions now, and this is Canadian productions in the Canadian market, which follows the same pattern. And our use fees have followed the same pattern, but our use fees are not only for the Canadian market. So this is where we focus and ask questions as well. And those questions are especially important considering that use of or TV and film viewing, both on streaming, well, especially on streaming, but also actually on conventional TV, have gone up during the pandemic. And so we know members are keenly interested in whether that increased use has resulted in increased use fees. Remember, use fees aren't based on the number of transactions, but the value of the transactions, the DGR. So we really are looking for the earnings, distribution earnings, and our use fees should follow that. According to the stats, our use fees are following the Canadian distribution earnings, and internationally we have more questions. And in fact, you'll in our follow-up and enforcement, we ask a lot of those questions. So how does this system, how is the system implemented and how does it change? These systems are written in the CBAs, in the IPA and BCMPA. These are collective agreements that are negotiated periodically, usually every 3 years. I think in BC it has to be every 3 years, actually. And the members do participate in the negotiation. I mean, in order to make changes, there has to be agreement between ACTRA and the producers. And to get agreement, you have to have leverage. Leverage comes from collective action or influence or strategic negotiation. And whatever change happens, it has to start with members. And so members can get involved. Members should participate in focus groups. Members should answer the member surveys that come before them. I understand just today, Alistair, perhaps ACTRA Toronto sent out member surveys on the IPA, which is being negotiated in November of this year. So please do that. That input is valuable. Even if it's just answering the survey, that's fantastic. If you're invited to a focus group, please educate yourself and go to the focus group and let your voice be known. And also it's another thing you can obviously connect with your branch. That's your first point of contact. But if you feel like it's something that ACTRA PRS needs to hear, I'm personally available to hear your ideas. And this is as much to do with the process of distributing it as anything. So we do want to hear from you, and you are influential. When it comes to the actual rules themselves, we have to have agreement of the producers through negotiation, and that can be a challenge, but a challenge that's it's our whole purpose. It's our whole reason to get positive change for performers. Speaking of positive change for performers, there are, aside from use fees in our agreements, there's also the notion of copyright or performers' rights through legislation and not through collective agreements. Right now, this is non-existent in Canada. So there is nothing in the Copyright Act of Canada that would give a performer right over their performance in an audiovisual work. If any of you are also performers on sound recordings, or if you have associates that are, those rights do exist. And ACTRA PRS actually has a whole division titled ACTRA RACS that does look at performers' rights on sound recordings under the Copyright Act. There are performers' rights for sound recordings outside of Canada in other countries. And ACTRA PRS being a separate not-for-profit and a collective management organization, recognized, we're part of SCAPR, we're recognized as a collective management organization by the Copyright Board of Canada. We are permitted to enter into agreements, in this case unilateral agreements, because there's no right in Canada. We can enter into agreements with other CMOs in other countries where those rights exist. And when Canadian productions productions with ACTRA performers are exploited in another territory, we can collect those rights. Now, thus far, because there's no right in Canada to do this, we are limited. We are limited in what we can do internationally as well. So there are only very few countries which will enter into an agreement with us without Canada having a similar right, and Spain being the largest. So we do handle this right now. We have an agreement with our partner in Spain. If a Canadian production is used there and broadcasted there, performed for the public, it generates a royalty. They send those royalties to us, and we would divide them in a similar manner that we divide use fees. We in fact use the same system. It ends up on your use fee reports, and you will see a note beside the amount. And if it's a BC production, we send it to BC to distribute those amounts. And that's the way it's currently working. This is still a very small part of what we distribute. This is less than 3% of all amounts administered. And again, this is separate from use fees because it is a statutory right, in this case, legislation in another country, as opposed to a right gained under a contract. This would increase if we had a Canadian audiovisual right. So I'll just end, my last slide just talks about trying to get an audiovisual right in Canada. The audiovisual rights in other countries, some of them actually came about before the Beijing Treaty, but the Beijing Treaty is a WIPO treaty, a World Intellectual Property Organization treaty, where a number of countries came together and said, conceptually, we want to start giving additional rights to performers on, for lack of a better term, film and television. Actually, audiovisual works. In Canada, if you're really going to get nerdy with it, they're referred to as cinematographic works in the Copyright Act of Canada. Canada was not party to that treaty. We did not sign that treaty. You cannot sign it anymore. That has passed. It came into force in April 2020, but you can implement it, which is the same net effect. It just doesn't have the ceremony beside it. So we could still implement the treaty, and ACTRA, both in the past and coming up, is considering, or has asked the government to sign the treaty. And right now we're revising our ask to really focus on what we want out of the implementation of the treaty. None of the major English language producing countries, so Canada, the United States, and Great Britain, have implemented the treaty. And so the reason that it hasn't been implemented is it could have some pretty fundamental change on the industry. It's not necessarily agreed. In fact, likely to be disagreed that it should be implemented by producers and distributors. So we would have to work through and either align with them or state our case better than producers and distributors to have it implemented. But it's still important to us. We're just revisiting how we're going to do this with our National Executive Director and ACTRA National Council and all the branches. If we do go forward with our strategy, I'm confident we will, to kind of reignite. It's just been lying dormant a little bit. Reignite our ask for Canada to sign the treaty. We will need member support, and we'll need to explain to you why it's important. But then hopefully members will agree, and that we would need member support the same as the changes we advocated for under the Canada Employment Response Benefit, Canada Emergency Response Benefit and Bill C-10. Obviously, the Bill C-10 fight is not over, so we don't want to have too many irons in the fire at once either. So we're hoping that concludes successfully within, who knows, the coming months and years. And then this also is implemented in the coming months and years. So this is a big stay tuned. It could be a big thing for performers, not only from a monetary point of view, but there are other rights called for in the treaty, such as moral rights. I will end this slide there, and that ends our prepared presentation. I'm going to, I think I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now, and we'll turn it over to some questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This was very, very informative. Now, we do have some questions that people sent in that we'll get to right now. So here we go. So this, I'll start off right with a sort of a tough one. Why does PRS charge an additional 5% fee over the other, over and above the branch dues charges, while UBCP ACTRA does not?
Yeah, this is a great question. So we are really two different organizations. The UBCP is right in the branch, as it is the branch. Sandy is on the exact same team and works for the exact same organization as the folks that organize and the folks that collect contracts. And that model is working for them just with dues alone. And for ACTRA PRS, we're a separate organization, and this model's working for us. To give you a little bit more, what could be generating some of this, without getting scientific about it, too scientific about it, is that BC does have a higher proportion of studios, and I think you would agree, Sandy. I don't want to say anything that's out of line, but I think there's a higher proportion of studios reporting. When I say studios, I mean American studios. I wouldn't say that's easier, but it's the American studios don't require quite as much follow-up, perhaps. You know, these are theories. Still lots of hard work there. I would also say that working with I'm not going to get the number of branches right. David, you'll help me. Outside of UBCP, there would be 7 ACTRA branches.
8.
8. Working with the 8 branches is different than working with 1 branch, and there are costs that come into that. And one of those costs is working with a number of smaller productions that happen in various branches. And so we are assuming all the paperwork from all those locations. We're working with the staff from all those locations. So that's another factor. And just the way that costs get split within ACTRA PRS, and that's the model we found. We also probably have a larger catalog at this point, an older catalog. So some of this stuff does take some extra chasing. There's also the miners trust, which is not a, if we're talking among members, and you guys deserve to know, it doesn't necessarily, the service fees on miners trust get mixed with the service fees in order to pay for that service. So that is, I think we'd all agree, a very important service, but one that is there on ACTRA PRS.
Right.
So I think there's a list of, those are the kind of the high level questions. The most important thing to know, though, also is that we always are looking, but with me starting as another opportunity and with Marie Kelly starting as National Executive Director a couple of years ago, there's a real opportunity to re-examine. We have a great team that's also willing to re-examine how we spend and the resources we're allocating. And if nothing else, to make sure we are focusing as much attention as we can on enforcement. As we know, that's a priority for you. That is also a priority for ACTRA, PRS, and ACTRA National. So that's something we're always looking to do.
Thank you. This is another one. There's some pre-sent questions here. Is there a formal communication system set up to share non-payer info at the branches?
Is there a system set with non-payer info? There is not a formalized system other than we talk all the time and we're coordinating better than ever. But in terms of automated and structured, this is, again, something that we're looking to make sure that we connect with all at ACTRA PRS, at least, connect with those 8 branches and make sure that we're coordinated with them. Yes, I don't know. And I'm sure, Sandy, if you have a problem with one distributor or producer, you can go to the other part of the UBCP office and talk about it.
Well, and we talk amongst each other too.
Sure.
Which is great, right?
Yeah. And we also, we talk with UBCP and ACTRA PRS, obviously deal with the same distributors. And so we know when we have a common problem child. And so I'm not sure if there are children. Anyway, you get my point. We have a common problem distributor, and so we could take action together. In fact, some of the grievances we're talking about, while they are separate grievances, they are against some of the same distributors and producers, and so we're making sure to hit them from both sides of the country, and we're quite locked in, and that's pretty impressive, actually.
So there's a good question. Another good question has come in here. What is the process if a member wishes to inquire about or appeal residual remissions or reports?
There's not an official appeal process. It's case by case. We expect you to contact us. I would say what I would ask is that the member contact, if it's PRS, contact PRS. What we will do is we won't send out copies of distributors' reports. We try not to do that. It's not necessarily public information, but we will go over those reports with the performer. In the before times, this would have been in the office, pulling out files and showing them why we think this is an okay amount or why we think it's not and what we're doing about it. Either could happen. In these times, we try to do a Zoom and screen share and show them the reports, and feel free. If there's something you're really not believing, again, call us. We'll make a time, we'll meet, and we'll go over that production.
Right. I think we have time for one more. And there's, this was sent in to us prior. Is there a process in place to proactively seek funds rather than just passively waiting for the checks to show up?
Yeah, so again, it's an interesting situation. In this case, because it's not copyright, we have a contract with each of the producers. So we have information to begin with. And so the real hard work, the proactive work is done by Alistair and his team at ACTRA Toronto, and in the other branches organizing the work. Once it's organized and we've received the legal paperwork, we will follow up with all of those productions if we don't receive reporting. With the caveat that there are 17,000 productions in the system for ACTRA PRS. So we will go through prioritization. It won't surprise you that, or maybe it will, we will try to assess what the value of residuals weighting are on the list of productions as one measure of priority. It's not the only way we prioritize, but we do go after the highest value non-compliant productions first, often. But we'll also do it based on member inquiry. If you really, if a member inquires about a production, we're going after it. And so those are two ways we prioritize. Again, with 17,000 productions, you have to prioritize given the resources. We just went through the resources conversation.
Great. Well, this has been really phenomenal.
Sorry, it's just me. Sorry, I have a question by text. If we could put that one in because they weren't able to use the chat room.
Sure.
Residuals are associated with the work of a person. What happens with residuals if that work is paid for through their corporation?
Great question.
If the residuals are paid to a corporation?
Yes. So if on the contract, the performer's name is there, but they are paid through their corporation. So let me think about this for a second. So you can actually, correct, and I think I'm right because Shane does this, you can actually get paid your residuals through your corporation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All you need to do is register with PRS or with UBCP, and you get paid your residuals through your corporation, just like you did for the contract that you worked on.
Yeah. We need the incorporation papers.
Correct. And then that would change the tax form that you get at the end of the year. And then you've got to then go sort that out with your accountant. I'm hoping that answered the question that's
It's-
on my phone.
In addition to that, it's also super important for the individual to ensure that their ACTRA branch has their loan out corporation information as well. Because if we need to do a deep dive and go into paperwork for a show, if an individual's name is not associated with their loan out corporation, it makes it very difficult for us to actually track them down. So just, make sure that you reach out to your branch and provide that loan out corporation information as well. It just helps all of the ties fall into place really nicely.
David, I believe you're on mute.
How can that possibly be that I was on mute? Oh, that's really something. Anyway, we really, really appreciate the effort that went into this, both on the Stunt Committee's side and also, of course, on PRS's side and UBCP ACTRA as well. Thank you very much, Sandy and Max and Alistair and Jen and, of course, Michael and Courtney. And Tanya, as always, you make it happen. Thank you, Sandy. This is being recorded, so if you really want to get the details again, you can. It will be sent to you through email, and we'll be able to see it on ACTRA's websites. And if you have any questions that haven't been answered so far, please don't hesitate to either mail them to Michael Murray or to Tanya or to myself. We will get answers to you because that's what we do. We get you the answers. So this has been our first attempt at a UBCP ACTRA PRS town hall, and I think we can have more of these because they're helpful and I think they're being appreciated. Thank you for all the people who attended this, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Be safe, and don't forget to fill out your questionnaire that was sent to you today. And if you've been asked to be on a focus group, just jump at the chance. We look forward to seeing you. Anything